What's going on? Welcome back. Um, I told you if anything interesting developed that I would come back. Not necessarily anything interesting to report other than the Allant, which is that French ship with that recovery equipment on it, has now started to head south. They're about 45 miles out from the Titanic wreck site. And they basically just went from a standstill to top speed. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but after it met up with another boat, basically 100 meters apart or 200 meters apart, which is insanely close. Absolutely insanely close. Now, don't pay attention to the 3 hours away. This is a very sketchy. The site sucks. It sucks. But this is the ship that's headed that way. It's the one that has the rover or whatever you want to call it that's on there. It's got the stuff that would be used for the rescue. But other than that, we don't really know. But I'll show you this. And so if you look here, the Polar Prince, I believe it's Canadian. Because this is a lot of the Canadian Coast Guard, but you also have the French Coast Guard, or excuse me, I believe so. And they're all they're trying to they're trying. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but it looked like they had met up in the middle. Maybe there was some transfer. I have no idea, but I found it. What I was always watching for was a boat to just take off. Like they're searching, and then I would wait for that ship to just one of them to take off. And it happened to be the Allant, which went from literally just kind of floating out there to now full steam ahead south about 45 miles. And it doesn't go fast, but at all. But that's where it's headed. And I don't, like I said, I don't know what the result is. There's no way for anybody to know how this thing ends, but they're doing everything they can to rescue these people. I read something earlier talking about no, they have not found it. The latest, all I'm saying, all I know is that while watching Marine Traffic, the recovery, the Allant, which is that French ship that you've heard so much about, it's just painfully slow, but it's not built for speed. I believe there's a helicopter on there. I could be wrong. I know there's a helicopter on one of these recovery ships, but so you have the Polar Prince, you had I believe it's the Anne Harvey was out there, and then these are all very high tech ships that are assisting. I mean, they're literally, and I'll show you a little bit of the Allant or Allante. I believe it's the Allant, but I don't know that. I think it's the Allant. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know how to pronounce this stuff. but now it's at 12 knots. I thought this thing's moving. I don't know why it's moving the way it's moving, but it's moving. And it's headed right for, let me see. Let me share this. It's headed right towards the crash site of the Titanic. So give me 1 second. This is going to be a little different of a stream. I'm really just kind of paying attention to it with you guys. I'm not going to have anything profound to say. I don't know much about any of it other than I'm fascinated. Yeah, so I mean, legitimately, it's now this ship is now sailing 12 knots, which is almost top speed for this thing. But it was at a standstill, and some unmarked vessel, it was like 40 nautical miles away. I don't know. I think that they may, this is just me thinking out loud, but I think that they may have lowered that Victor 6000 whatever into the maybe. I don't know. But I'm looking here, and the Allant is now cooking. So then you have another vessel out there called the Polar Prince, and this one is going. It's going slowly north, but it was at one point. This seems like they may be lowering this Victor 5000 or 6000, excuse me. I don't want to short them. Lawless says the lab, there's tremendous value in you holding this space. For those of us who are equally fascinated, generosity of spirit is appreciated. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Yeah, it is that this whole thing is completely fascinating. Okay, so but the one you want to really keep an eye on is the Allant. And yeah, I just let me bring up the thing that they're going to use. Cuz this thing's gnarly. This thing's absolutely gnarly. All right, so French send deep diving robot to help. And now this is what I think. Now, once again, I'm telling you, I don't know anything about this, but just from what I've been reading, what I've been tracking, what I've been paying attention to, we have about 4 hours of oxygen left that they estimate that's how much reserve they have. Once again, that's an estimate. Oxygen does, when I say unfortunately, it doesn't just stop immediately. It's a process. So there's optimism that maybe there is more out there. Maybe there is more time than has kind of been put out there. But once again, that's speculation. We don't know. But the Allant or Adelante, I don't know how to pronounce it, is out there now. and it's making a beeline, picking up steam, headed towards the site. That is the boat carrying this this Victor 6000. So let's just take a look here. French send deep diving robot to help Titanic search. A French robot that can dive 20,000 feet or 6,000 meters, which is actually 2,000 meters more than the Titanic's at. Let's see. Underwater on its way to vanished. Okay. A French robot that can dive 20,000 feet, 6,000 meters underwater is on its way to help find the tourist. And by the way, our friend that was on News Nation does not like when you call them tourists, but they are tourists. And that's true. To find the tourist submersible, that vanished as it descended to the Titanic wreck, and it could help free the sub if it's trapped. Its operator said Wednesday. The unmanned robot called Victor 6000, what a great name that is, can dive deeper than other equipment now can dive deeper than other equipment now at the site in the North Atlantic, and has arms that can be used remotely controlled to cut cables or perform other maneuvers to release a stuck vessel, the operator said. So for the people out there that are telling you there's no way that this can get done, I'm not saying it can or it can't. I don't know. They're saying they can. The robot, which is aboard the French vessel, is expected to arrive late on Wednesday. So we're late on Wednesday. It looked to me as if there was some coordination going on, possibly a launch. I don't know that. Just speculating, because it was just sitting there. Two boats, just a few hundred meters apart, just sitting there, just buoying up and down. Right. But anyway, let's see. And so it's there. Victor is not capable of lifting the submarine on its own, said Oliver Lefort, the head of the naval operations in Ifremer, the state-run French Ocean Research Institute, which operates the robot. Now, but he told Reuters that the robot could help hook the 10-ton submersible called the Titan to a ship with the capability to lift it to the surface. Now, I know that there's people out there that are saying there's not enough time, very pessimistic attitude, and I understand it, because I feel the same way. I feel this is, it just seems like it's impossible. It seems like it, but we don't know that. But it does seem like it's just, wow, But there's allegedly, and by the way, I am very not, I wouldn't say curious. I'm weary of this 4 hours of oxygen left. Now, I don't know how much oxygen's left. I don't know if it's already ran out or it could have ran. That's if the thing is even intact. We don't even know. But what's happening now is the Allant has shown up. It looked like it was at a standstill for quite some time, doing absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden, on this marine traffic, you see this thing take off. just and basically from a standstill to as fast as it can go. And let's just check in with that. It's at 13 knots now. And it's headed towards it's 50 miles out. And the Terry Fox, the Horizon Arctic, and the Ann Harvey are further north, and they're hours away. But you have this boat, this ship, the Allant, and let me just bring this up. Okay, so if you see it's at 13 knots now, it goes from standstill in the middle of the ocean, and now Brooks, well, come on, man. Like I get it. I get it, but come on. Why do you do that? We don't know anything. The safe bet would to be yeah, you're probably right, but come on. You're killing it here. People have hope. Let's have some hope. I get it. Crazier thing. I don't know if crazier things have happened, but crazy things happen all the time. Remember? You ever see Remember the Titans? The greatest movie of all time. That's hope. Whole town no longer racist because of football. You know. All right. And so let me see here. I'm a hope dealer. Oh, well, look, man, it's possible. Anything's possible. But I don't know. I'm just saying that it to me, this has gotten extremely. Let's see. Yeah, that thing, I mean, it's headed right for that site. That's so maybe they're gonna go drop it in. So it's a 2 hours to the bottom. Who knows how long it takes? I mean, yes, this legitimately crunch time, if anything. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let me get an update here. Yep. So it's 50 miles away. I don't even know what 12 knots is. I know it's not very fast. I know that. We're looking here. Let me. Okay, so we're gonna go back to this. So basically, what they're sticking in the ocean. What program are you using to track these? It's well between Twitter and marine traffic. Let me see. The site is marinetraffic.com. And it's a very touchy site. I'll tell you that right now. It's very, very finicky. Okay. So we're at 13 knots, headed south. And all right. This thing sucks. Like this website is tough. It's tough to navigate. All right. God, there's a 77-year-old man in there. The robot is operated by 25 strong. It's operated by 25 strong crew. We can work nonstop for up to 72 hours, and we don't need to stop at night. Well, especially if you're under the ocean, that's not going to matter. Yeah, it's not fast at all. They're, like I said, they're not built for speed. So it looks like the French are leading the way. Let's see. Okay. So somebody said it's not lowered yet, but I mean, you got to really kind of take all that with a grain of salt. And there's your Atalante right there. Smoking Raven coming through with the my family's not involved. It's not my family. Kind of, yeah, exactly. Safety third. It's not, but it's not true. What you're saying, it's just, it's insensitive. And, you know, if, like I said, if it was your family, you would feel the same way. Y'all are clowns if you think they're alive. Well, you're a clown just because you tell people that they're clowns. See you later, Smoking Raven. Weirdo. It's just weird. You guys are clowns if you think anything. If you don't think what I think, you're a clown. You see? You have a good night, Smoking Raven. I mean, why are you watching? You just waiting for it to be right. I mean, what the hell? I don't get it. Imagine P says, even if Hope is slim, we'll go all the way. I mean, they're trying. They're trying. Yeah, really. It's just a social. So it's a form of social terrorism. That's what it is. Okay, hold on. Let me bring up such a weird live stream. Like it really is. It's the weirdest. Um Let me see here. Do news. This is kind of what we had talked about this earlier. Let me show you here.
First and foremost, I can't imagine what you're going through, knowing that you had the invitation to be on this mission, on this sub, and you turned it down. Why?
Imagine that.
Why are you not on the sub?
Because it's a piece of crap.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, I'm not going through anything, nothing compared to the people that are currently stuck on the sub, assuming they're still alive. I think it's absolutely terrible. And just for clarity, I was invited to join OceanGate on a Titanic research trip this year if there were space available. And, I think this is the only trip that was going this year, so I wasn't able to join due to the timing. But it's really very, very tragic. And I certainly don't want to make this about me. I think it's much more sad for the people that are potentially stuck at the bottom of the ocean currently.
Talk to me about the fauna at this depth and the possibility that this could be
Well, when I said that the thing sucks,
actual wildlife, sea creatures that may have interfered. What kind and how can they possibly survive at that depth and that pressure?
Sure. Well, I do think that the potential for it to be sea life is pretty slim, but there is certainly a possibility of it. At that depth, we're known to have giant squid. Sperm whales will go down that deep, and there are actually quite a large number of unknown species still at that depth because so much limited research has gone into exploring those depths, and so we're still learning about all the creatures that are down there. I think the likelihood of it being a sperm whale is incredibly slim because they're quite frankly, very docile animals for the most part. However, squid, especially when they see bright lights and flashing things, they indeed could show more aggression.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to.
No, we're not going to do that. Let me see here. I'm just going to periodically check back in to see what this thing, this Allant, is doing. Josh loves that submarine controller. I do not love the submarine at all. I think that the submarine is a piece of crap that they took shortcuts on. And I don't think that it was fit for tourism. So that's what Girth says, shout out to all the people everywhere in the whole wide world. So just a blanket hello to 8 billion people from yours truly, Mr. G. Brooks, part-time producer, part-time troll, part-time Mr. G. Brooks, responsible for the Chris Hansen show. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Oh man, if I wasn't this part, you don't have to give anything, Amy. Thank you so much. And you're, by the way, I think you're our newest mod, and so thank you for everything that you do. I was kidding. Everybody gets so. I mean, you were kind of trolling earlier, a little bit. What was a great show? All right, I'm checking back in on Twitter. Give me a second here. So weird. Because, like I said, the Allant is the one that you're going to want to keep an eye on. I find it so strange that this thing's been caught on the Titanic before. It was stuck on a propeller. I can't get over that. I cannot get over that. I can't. I don't know why. It boggles. It boggles my mind. Okay. We really want to get so it looks like the Anne Harvey that we talked about just a little bit ago and the Horizon Arctic are both now full steam ahead, heading in the same exact direction the Allant is. And so, and these things are going up a bit faster, but there you go. Show the nautical screen again. Hold on, I'll try. I'm very good at it. So that's the polar prints. Let's look at the Allant. I really do. I suck at this so bad. I don't know. It's what's that site name? It's called marinetraffic.com. Okay, so there's the Adelante. 13 knots headed straight for the site. Let me bring it in here a little bit. So this is the satellite map. So I'm kind of learning on the go here. Dark map, simple map. I think we're simple. I'm a simple map kind of guy. That doesn't look simple to me. Oh my God, this thing's a pain. All right. I don't like it. So it sounds like the Adelon is about 2.5 hours out. It's about 2.5 hours out. It's on its way. It's going as fast as it can. 2 other boats have now joined that we just talked about. So let me see. Oh, this is a good one. There we go. There we go. That's the business right there. So you have the Adelant, Polar Prince, and Deep Energy. So you have this cluster of search ships out here. I don't know what and honestly, and this is such a great question. I don't know what they know. No, I don't know. I don't know, but I would imagine that for some reason, for none other than, you know, this is where they were hearing the pinging or the banging or the whatever. Now, one thing that I did find kind of interesting, because I thought that this thing had probably just imploded. And they said that that would have been picked up and it would have been very loud, because sound carries really well underwater. From what I understand, I don't know. I don't really like water, that like shower water, shallow swimming pools. Does anyone know what the deep energy ship is? I don't. Take a look. The deep energy vessel. It's a vessel finder. So that looks like that's the one with, it looks like it has a winch on it. Wonder if we can track this on the map. Here, let's try it. There it is. No, that's not it. That's that's a long time ago. Son of a gun. 10 days ago. Anyway, yeah, waters, especially that. Ship type pipe layer, Bahamas. From what I understand, 4 hours of oxygen that they think. They don't know. But let's take a look at the Adelant again. And so this is what this is this is basically all it has. That right there. They're gonna send Victor 6000 down there. I don't know if it's too late. I don't know. I have no idea. I hope it's not too late. I hope. Here's the thing, and people, I get so sick of hearing this too. Well, they're millionaires, they're billionaires, they're this, they're that. They're humans. I don't like to see anything suffer. I don't care how much money they have. I don't care about that. I really don't care about that. It's really, yeah, nobody's going down there. These poor people. I'm just, it's just sad. Yeah, and I say all the time, I wouldn't do anything like this, but that's just not how. That's not really how my life. You know what I'm saying? Like I just don't do that kind of stuff, and yeah, it's just. Where's this one now? Let me bring something up here. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. And so here's a tweet from somebody that I've been following. Um, I believe the fast movement of vessels south is a final push to rescue those aboard the Titan submersible. Hopefully, the efforts yield positive results for what must be horrendous conditions on the Titan. I would agree. I would agree with that. Ocean. Let's see here. All right. Is it Atalante? Let me see here. A video. Oh, this is kind of neat. I'll take a look. Here, let me show you this. So this is them launching what basically to me looks like a cooler, like a Yeti cooler or something. But it's an unmanned robot with arms. It's capable of untangling, who knows? Here's the thing. If those people are still alive, and I hope that they are, the conditions are really bad. They're going to be weak. I don't even know if they'll be lucid. I have no idea. They've gone probably quite some time without food. The situation is dire, and this is the last ditch effort. The banging would make you think that someone is down there. And so let's see here. And so now the Polar Prince is moving. Let me see if I can share this. All right, so now the Polar Prince is moving in the same direction as the Allant or Atalante. But so these two are near each other. So another boat heads in that direction. Very interesting. Polar Prince is Titan's mothership. So that's where it launched off of. That's interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is correct. Sorry, I was a little parched. What I don't understand is how they're allowed to just like, there are shipwrecks that are grave sites that are off limits. How that hasn't happened with this, I'll never know. Yeah, Polar Prince is the one that launched him. Let me see here. Do we got any? Okay. This will show you exactly what's going on. All right. So this is the current location of the Adelante. Polar prints. This is the Titanic wreck site, as you can see. And it's headed directly for it. They're saying, we're saying, what are we at for? 4 hours of oxygen left. I don't know how much. Let me look here. I have no idea, to be honest with you. Yeah, the banging noise is hopeful for sure. Let's take a look here. I don't know. I don't know what the oxygen situation is. Yeah, one man knows to bang in intervals. Grace has a good point here. The bang noise could be from the water moving it, I guess. No, I have not checked WFLA. 5 more hours. 5. So they say so. Okay. Well, I don't know. That's what that's what they would. That's the thought, right? I don't know how much it weighs. Let me bring something else up here. Where are we at? And let's see. 23,000 pounds. Really? It's for that. That's really small. I can't believe that's tiny. And it weighs that much. Wow. Video. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to navigate here and not doing a very good job of it. Sorry. Maybe it's the weight of the deck. And here we go. Let me share this.
Much invulnerable. By the time we're done testing it, I believe it's pretty much invulnerable.
And that's pretty much what they said about the Titanic.
That's right. And I will go on all the first dives, put my money where my mouth is.
That was OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush doubling down in 2017 that his submersible, a version before the one that's currently missing, was basically invulnerable. But Rush has essentially put his money where his mouth is, since he is now on the missing sub, the Titan. Safety concerns, though, have plagued the Titan sub for years. On a trip last summer, the Titan lost communication with its mothership for 2.5 hours, which was documented in a CBS morning show segment. Back in 2018, OceanGate fired former employee David Lockridge after he said he raised concerns about the safety of the Titan. He said he advised the company to do more testing on the vessel's hull. Lockridge saying in court documents the paying passengers would not be aware and would not be informed on this experimental design, the lack of non-destructive testing of the hull, or that hazardous flammable materials were being used within the submersible. His comments coming in response to OceanGate's lawsuit against him, claiming he breached his employment contract by disclosing confidential information to OSHA when he filed a whistleblower complaint with the agency. Now, we are also learning that it's likely OceanGate didn't even have insurance for the Titan vessel. A chartered marine scientist telling News Nation the leading insurer in the underwater and marine tech industry, quote, wouldn't touch OceanGate with a barge pole and refused to insure them. He also believes that 4 to 5 other top marine insurance companies refused to insure OceanGate. Now, as we mentioned, the search continues tonight for the 5 missing, including a father and son, and British billionaire Hamish Harding. Joining me now is Harding's friend, Chris Brown, who had paid to go on the mission with Harding, but backed out due to safety concerns. Thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. So talk to us about exactly why you decided not to go on the mission.
Yeah, first, a slight correction. It wouldn't have been on this exact dive necessarily. I just paid to go on a very similar dive. It was back in 2017 as one of the earlier investors in the program with the scientific view of going down and doing a 3D scan of the Titanic. They set different milestones where your deposit ramped up. So if they hit the first milestone, you paid more in a deposit. They constantly missed those milestones. They weren't hitting the depths that they were supposed to be doing, which was the first alert in my direction. Secondly, when they were doing some testing out in the Bahamas, I was aware of them using like industrial piping, scaffolding type stuff as a ballast, which I thought was a bit amateurish. They made a bit of a play on the controller, which sounded like fun, but I did think, well, surely you could have developed something a bit more professional. And then as time went by and they missed more and more depths, by the end of November 2018, I started pressing them on certification. And it became evident that not only did they not have certification, they weren't going to try and even get certification for going down to 3,800 meters once, let alone several times. And at that point, I thought, these risks are beyond what I can mitigate in my own head. So I withdrew from the program.
Did you speak directly with Stockton Rush, the CEO?
I didn't deal with them directly, no.
And
through an intermediary.
Did you express any of your concerns to your friend who is now on that vessel?
I expressed my concern to two different friends, both of whom pulled out at different stages, not directly with Hamish, no.
I want to play a piece of sound from Stockton Rush because he talked about some of the safety issues and why he didn't think it was that dangerous. This is number 3.
I don't think it's very dangerous. If you look at submersible activity over the last 3 decades, there hasn't even been a major injury, let alone a fatality. What worries us is not once you're underwater. What worries me is when I'm getting you there, when you're on the ship in icy states with big doors that can crush your hands. And people who
I mean, sorry, it's not funny, but like he's being an a-hole. He's worried about getting them to the submarine where they're safe. I mean, this guy is a salesman. I mean, the more I hear about it, the worse it is.
may not have the ship, you're underwater. What worries me is when I'm getting you there, when you're on the ship in icy states with big doors that can crush your hands and people who may not have the best balance who fall down, bang their head. That's to me the dangerous part. Mm-hmm. But the scary part for most people is, going down to 6,000 PSI.
When you were talking to them about going on the vessel, is that what they said to you about the safety concerns? That, look, we're not really worried about the big picture stuff. We're really more worried about smaller injuries?
We didn't get into that detail, discussion on the risks and dangers, purely because it hadn't progressed that far. I think my opinion on the risks and dangers are the complete opposite. I think moving around the mothership would be relatively safe compared to being in an experimental vessel going down to 3,800 meters. It's very deep.
Did they make it clear it's experimental? Because, we've had a number of people on who have been defending the company, basically saying everyone who goes on this knows how incredibly risky it is. And these are not tourists. They are explorers, they're experienced people, etc.
I'm not sure about their sales policy. I would definitely count myself as an explorer and aware of risks, probably why I pulled out. Hamish is a very experienced explorer, done lots of expeditions. He'd be aware of the risks. He took a different view on those risks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to
It
come
looks
on
like
the
a
program,
kidney
Chris
bean.
Brown.
Pleasure. I must say, no matter whose fault or anything this is, the issue right now is we've got to save these 5 people. And our thoughts go out to the friends and family of those who are underwater.
Well said. Thank you so much.
There's let me just read this really quick. So somebody was saying that this thing, the way that it is designed is horribly unsafe. No navigation system, poor communication system, exposed thrusters, no invadable flotation collar once it rises, limited air supply, locked in, no way to get out, and no way to get fresh air when on the surface. That was something that I thought about as well. I mean, when you're in, and even if you come up, which is the whole point of the submarine, if you don't, or if once you come up, what if you're just kind of stranded out there for days? How are you going to breathe? I find that weird as well. This guy said that he'd be nervous taking it into the deep end of the pool. Never mind 13,000 feet below the surface and total blackness and cold. 6,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. So, I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, it was yeah, they're bolted inside with no way to do anything. Let me see here. Give me 1 second. Looking for an update. All right, here we go. And so it says, so right here it says the Arctic Horizon SAR at 16.5 knots hauling towards the Titanic site. Seems she and the Anne Harvey were the two unmanned vessels. Allant raced north to meet them. Now all three are moving fast towards the Titanic. And there you go. There it is. It's crazy. So they're just full steam ahead. So the Coast Guard did say though that there were noises. They picked up noises yesterday and today, which is interesting. If they picked up the noises today and yesterday, what is this? Let me see what this is. Hold on. SAR search and rescue. Thank you. Well, it's definitely not the Titanic crew. Josh D coming in hot, as always. No, they're not. They're not saying. They won't say. But it looks like what I'm reading is we got this 5 hours of oxygen left. And if they're down there, this is going to be a race against the clock. I mean, it already is, but we're talking like razor thin margins here. Within, half hour, 45 minutes, maybe even less than that. And okay, here we go. Get rid of some of these. Where's the news? Where's the News Nation? Here we go. I don't know who these people are.
Looking for something the size of a minivan, whereas you were looking for the Titanic and it took 2.5 hours.
Yes. So, the last gentleman you were speaking to was not optimistic. From the moment I heard about this crisis 3 or 4 days ago, I was not optimistic either, just because I know how small this is, and I know firsthand just how immense the ocean is and how.
And Sammy, thank you so much for gifting a membership. It's very appreciated.
Deep they are. I mean, this is a special vehicle built to go where no one else can go. So the thought of rescue seems very, very, very difficult. But maybe they're not. We don't know where they are. For all we know, they just lost contact. Maybe they're bobbing somewhere near the surface. It could be a whole different story. There's still cause for hope.
Denise, but for COVID, you couldn't descend, so you were on the support ship, the Polar Prince.
And Josh D says these people not necessarily the Rush guy, whatever his name is. I don't remember, but he said that somebody mortgaged their home to do this. Some lady said she'd been saving up her whole life. I don't know how you save $250,000 for, I think I don't know how you save up for something like that. I really don't.
Can you just?
It's like saving up for a Lamborghini. Just seems weird.
Wrap this up for me and give me the sense of what.
That's the Simpsons creator. Interesting.
You think is happening on that deck right now with those crew members? You were there. You probably felt the nerves as you watched your husband descend. What do you think they're going through right now, having been on that same deck?
I'm sure they're going through what I went through, but many times over. I was nervous when Mike was apart from me. I would go by mission control and get a sense of where they were. The mission commander had some sense that he would point to a map of the ocean. They're at this level, they're doing this. And I would feel better, and I try and step away. But it's very quiet on the mothership. On a dive day, you're all thinking about the people down below. Where are they? When are they coming back? I remember waiting on the deck when I thought he was going to reemerge. Usually we're together, so we have a little bit of the attitude, well, if something happens, we're together. But for us to be apart and he be on such a dangerous mission, I thought, this is it. If something happens, the Simpsons writers will never forgive me. His family will never forgive me. I'm going to have to live anonymously, a solitary life. No one will hear from me ever again. It was very frightening.
It's harrowing to think of it, especially when we've got families right now who are in the depths, of despair. Mike and Denise Reese, thank you so much for bringing your experience to the program tonight.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome back. Tonight, search and rescue teams continue to look for that missing tourist submersible and are racing against the clock. The vessel had 5 people on board when it went missing Sunday, south of Newfoundland, where it was on a tour to see the wreckage of the Titanic. The submersible was equipped with 96 hours of life support. It's been missing since Sunday, which sets up tomorrow morning as a key deadline for finding the vessel and those on board. With the world captivated by this race against time, I'm joined now by a man who made that voyage himself back in 2005, Brian Day O'Connor, the son.
I've never seen posture like that before.
A former associate.
It's incredible. I wish I had posture like that. I don't.
Justice of the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. Good to see you.
Good to be back with you, Mark.
Appreciate your coming on. We've had you on before for some of your climbing exploits, but tonight, unfortunately, you're here to talk about going down in a small 4 or 5 person submersible to visit the Titanic. What was your first thought when you heard that this submersible had gone missing?
Concern like everyone.
And I'm telling you the truth. I'm watching the Titanic tonight. I'm doing it. I really like that movie. It's a good movie.
I've been devouring the information and getting the latest update like everyone else. My biggest concern was right out of the gate, the loss of communication during the descent when they were barely halfway through the descent. And they have had that happen before, this particular company, and the protocol was to immediately ascend back up. And that did not happen here. And so that's very concerning right out of the gate for me.
All right, so let's be a little more specific, and no one is lacking compassion here when we talk about this, but
yes,
knowing what you know about these trips, what do you think happened and what do you think will happen?
Well, I'm hoping for the best. That you were hearing that there's some pinging noises that are being picked up, but that could be a variety of things, and the Navy Coast Guard is readily saying we're not sure what that could be. I'm concerned that people aren't talking about it because it's the last thing we want to know that might have happened. Is there could have been a catastrophic implosion on the way down
because of the pressure on the hull. If something fails,
it all structure will fail, and they've had foggy conditions out there. Nobody would know. Right. You'd have a release of air, some bubbles come up, not a big noise. It's foggy. The mothership wouldn't notice. And that would explain the loss of communication and why they didn't resurface. I hope that's not the case, but it's a possibility.
There's been a lot of talk about this particular submersible and the fact that it felt a little jerry-rigged when I think a 60 Minutes crew went on board. They used a video game controller as one of the jerry-rigged parts to control this thing. How safe did you feel when you were aboard your submersible?
So I was on the Mir 1 and Mir 2 subs. Those are the same subs. They were built in the 80s by a Finnish company in cooperation for the Soviets' exploration Navy operations. And these were the ships used by James Cameron, the same exact. In fact, I had the same pilot that was in the movie with DiCaprio as our pilot. And one feature we had is sometimes the backup system, simple is best, no electronics. So if everything depowered for us, everything went bad, there was a brake lever in the middle, like a brake lever. We could pull mechanically out of my own power, and it would release a basket of weights on the outside of the sub, and we would immediately jettison.
Pop up like a cork.
Like a cork. And I'm not sure that I understand that they have a ballast release system, but if it had to be done off of power and they lost power, then it might not work. I honestly don't know the details on that.
The other thing we've learned is that the waiver that you sign, at least with this currently lost submersible, the folks on board there had to sign. Basically, you're signing your life away. Did you have to sign a waiver like that?
Oh, I'm sure I did in a lot of these activities. Yeah. The lawyers make sure of that for all of these things anymore.
Yeah. You shot some video inside your submersible. Let's take a look at that and see what it's like inside.
There's the other mirror looking at the bow of the
That's crazy.
Скилдыш, вас практически не слышу. Рядом работает мир 2. До связи. Here we are, bow of the Titanic, the other submarine. Oh, they're right.
So that was Russian you heard, and he was speaking in Russian to the pilot of the other mirror. And ours were 3-man subs. What we're all searching for right now is a 5-man sub. So we were 2 passengers and a pilot versus 4 in the pilot in today's craft.
I've always wondered this about people that do what you do. I mean, you put yourself at risk to the extreme, whether it's climbing mountains or going down to see the Titanic. How do you reconcile that desire to push the envelope and see the Titanic, knowing that there's very little separating you from instant death, with the fact that you have a life to come back to?
Sure, and a family I love. I just like to. It's a big world out there, and I just have always had a zest for some adventure. But it's calculated risk, and I'm not trying to put myself in harm's way as the thrill in and by itself.
But the vastness of the Atlantic, when you're 2 miles down or over 2 miles down, and again, there's very little separating you from instant death. Do you think about your own mortality?
No, I'm thinking about where we are, and it's a very, it's a special place. I mean, it's sort of a sacred burial ground of sorts. So we're very respectful being down there, right? Because of
it's a graveyard for many souls.
What it means, and it was as if we were having those same views of the Titanic movie so many of us all watched, and it's so in that regard it was thrilling. So it was a great adventure, and I hope we have a good outcome right now, but time is upon us.
Why no rescue beacon or some sort of a locator or tracking device on these things? Did you have one on your sub?
We had communication with the mothership.
But aside from that, I mean, let's say communication got lost, and we know that comms were lost on this thing.
I cannot tell you for certain. I actually don't recall. But what we did have is that simple system to release ballast, and that to me was I do a lot of skydiving. That was my emergency parachute to get back to the surface.
Yeah. How's your mom doing?
So she just turned 93 in
God
March,
bless her. Yeah.
and she's here in town, and she's going to hear a little music next week with some friends playing at her place, and God bless her. She's still hanging in there. It's not easy getting older, but it's always great to be here with her.
Have you, in your times with her, had a chance to discuss the great division that's happening in this country right now, not only with the current administration and the past administration and the war between the two political parties? I'm wondering what she thinks about that.
So she's not completely dialed into current events as we probably are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I'm thankful for that,
right,
because I can assure you she would not be pleased with our state of affairs in Washington, whether at the court or in Congress. I can tell you she always walked the middle aisle.
Than another. So that's why there are only shallow water rescues like that. On a deep water rescue like this, it would be actually just basically fish hooking it and bringing it back up. But to locate it, to navigate in, to get on station, to do all the things, it doesn't seem that there's even remotely enough time to do something like that.
Lucas, we were just talking about your assessment that it's a 99.99%. It's a catastrophic implosion. Would love to get your thoughts on why you came to that conclusion, because we do have two experts, including one of the best experts we've had, who's been at the OceanGate facilities, has a lot of experience. We do have Captain Ron.
Can you guys hear this?
McGann, and we do have Leroy and Mayer here. And Leroy and Ron did say that the likelihood of them having been stuck the likelihood of them surviving is probably as grim as them being already dead based on their assessment. Just not enough time. But they do think that I wouldn't go with 99. They wouldn't say it's 99% chance that it's a catastrophic implosion. Lucas, would love to get your assessment and how you came to that conclusion.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I am definitely absolutely no expert. So I just take the data, and I kind of have studied this since I was like a kid, like military kind of like survival and submarine retrieval and things like that. I know it sounds lame, and yeah, I probably shouldn't have been studying this since I was like 5, military stuff, but I have. And I've been around the ocean my entire life, and I've been in submarines myself and all that stuff, which doesn't make me an expert. Again, no argument there. But all the experts from other countries have also agreed, around an hour and 47 minutes, they lost contact, didn't hear from him again. They can't find him. I mean, the main reason why you wouldn't be able to find them is because the hull had a catastrophic failure. It's a custom-made hull. It's not up to standard. People aren't really inspecting it. And if you've ever worked with carbon fiber, if anybody in here has any idea about carbon fiber, it's very brittle. You know that when it fails, it fails.
Right.
There's no in between of stretching and bending and anything like that. It's very brittle. So is titanium, but it's mostly made of, what I've been reading, it's mostly made of carbon fiber, and it's not very well designed in general. There's a lot of indiscrepancies in terms of, hey, we had the NASA check us out, and we worked with this company, and they confirmed us. No, they didn't. They all said they didn't work with these guys. Not really. And there's a lot of people. There's a gentleman that actually got fired for saying that they had problems with the hull and the carbon fiber, and he was fired. He raised red flags about this stuff. So again, pretty obvious what's going on here, and it's really dangerous to make a submersible going to that depth out of any material. It's really dangerous, let alone carbon fiber in a unique blend of whatever this thing was made out of, mostly carbon fiber, especially. And it doesn't really matter what it's really made out of at the end of the day, but carbon fiber is like crazy brittle, and it gives you no room for margin. And it definitely, just like airplanes, submarines actually have a certain amount of times they can go somewhere before they have to be retired from service. And every time
that's what I was thinking about.
Atmospheres, just like airplanes, they go to, they can only fly about 10,000 times before they have to be retired. Then they turn into the airplanes into cargo planes. And then from there, they have a few, thousands, a couple thousand more missions. And then those planes have to be mothballed because.
Okay, sure, whatever. That's what I was thinking. I believe in the last live that I did, the carbon fiber is extremely strong. However, under pressure, I mean, after a while, it just doesn't stay strong. It's strong, and then it gets tested. And if there was even just, like I said, the slightest crack that you couldn't see, that thing is just going to go up in a big way. All right. We're joining the space.
Floating on the top, you can use satellites to actually find metal. So if it's actually made out of carbon fiber and titanium, there are satellites that actually even like search for gold and stuff like that. So there's a way to like find this thing, especially using AI to like scour maps and all sorts of stuff. People could pull this together. The reason why they can't find it, and that, by the way, the 30-minute noise has already been debunked by experts saying that and by the way, I know the sea is very loud. There's so many noises going on in the ocean. Whales, there's like wreckage from World War I and World War II down in that corridor as well. From, again, all the Liberty ships that went across in World War II and all the U-boats sinking all those ships. Like hundreds, if not thousands of ships were sunk. There's so much metal down there, especially in that area. That was known as the Big Corridor, and that's where all the wolf packs like hunted and sank tons of ships. So again, there's just, plus buoys are clanging every 30 minutes. Like, honestly, it could be just a buoy they heard. And it's a P-3 Orion that flew over and was dropping sonar buoys. So I kind of know this stuff really, really well, especially the military stuff. Again, and
I thought
they
you were
have
an expert.
a net across the entire world called SOSUS. You could actually hear when something implodes on SOSUS. You can hear literally like the tiniest of small sounds. We heard crushes actually happened, hull crushes happen on our SOSUS when we lost nuclear subs. The Thresher we heard when it had a catastrophic failure, not as much of an explosion, but the one lost off the Azores in the 60s, it was a fast attack submarine. Can't remember the name of it right now. I believe it's like, I can't remember the name, but it had a catastrophic failure, and I think it was a torpedo, Mark 68.
Scorpion.
Sorry, go ahead.
Scorpion.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
The Scorpion. Yeah, that's the one. Yep. So it's a Scorpion had a Mark 68 failure in its torpedo, and it blew up. And that's just like what they say. It could have been anything. But long story short, I'm guessing this is a catastrophic failure. I've worked with carbon fiber before. It does not have room for error. And this guy was playing it pretty fast and loose. It's just an obvious conclusion from all of the details and all of the experts from other countries saying most likely catastrophic failure. But the problem is the United States has to go through the motions. They have protocol, and they will do this all the way up until they find the wreckage of definitiveness and or the time of it's going to take to run out of air. They have to do that. It's part of protocol.
So Lucas, just a quick question, and I see a lot of hands up, so I think we're going to get different perspectives on this. Lucas, you're saying the consensus by most experts that it is a catastrophic failure and the likelihood of survival, and ignore the likelihood of survival, because I think we all agree this is very grim, not impossible, but just grim. But Lucas, you're saying that the consensus is that it is a catastrophic failure, because if it is, then we've had an instant death. If it isn't, then they're probably going to, or they've had a harrowing death that probably filmed with footage that'll be found later. Lucas?
Milliseconds. I'm guessing it's milliseconds or a millisecond, because a hull crush happens so quickly. And that's probably why they can't locate it. It's literally, imagine dropping an icicle on the ground. If you've ever dealt with icicles or anything that's really fragile,
Lucas, why couldn't they have a mechanical
He's an
failure?
icicle expert.
The ballasts were released, they floated up, and now they're trying to find them, because we've used the example before where a yacht cannot be found, let alone a small submersible. Why isn't that scenario possible where they just have a mechanical failure?
Well, the yacht probably couldn't be found because the yacht probably sank. So that's probably why they couldn't find it on the ocean.
Point,
yeah,
point.
That would have been my guess. But if it's catastrophic failure explains all of it. Like, they haven't heard from them. There's no communication at all. Yes, they could have had a power problem. That does not mean anything to me. I think being carbon fiber, it just makes a lot of sense to me that this thing was just not, it was, in theory, it was a prototype that they just kept using. And again, you keep going underwater enough times, and that hull becomes weaker and weaker. And all it has to have is a few problems with the hull, imperfections in the carbon fiber, because it hadn't been tested for that thing to fail after a little while. So what I was trying to say earlier was there was I don't know if you guys know the history of the Gloucester
If anybody
meteor,
watched,
but the meteor was basically
first stream. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Wait, was it the meteor? Yeah, it was. I don't think it was the meteor actually, but it was the first jet airliner that had square windows, and because it had square windows,
once that thing's cracked, and by the way, it's hard to see a crack in the carbon fiber.
No idea why. They put the
it's
body
extremely
of the airplane
strong
underwater
while it's intact.
They pressurized it, unpressurized it, pressurized it, unpressurized, and they found the weakness in the window. That's the only way they found out why the airplane kept crashing and killing everybody on board. And it happened so quick up in the air when they crashed, because it happened so quick and it was a catastrophic failure and there was no communication. This is exactly what's going on right now.
And
A
Dynamite
catastrophic
says
failure
it
and they can't find
flexes,
it.
and every
So
time
they
it
began
flexes, it
their
becomes a
descent at
little
8
less
a.m. on
sturdy.
Sunday. That's when they've begun their descent. I just don't know what time zone they're referring to.
They did leave late, it says. They had planned to leave, and they left, I think it was somewhere between 2.5 and 4 hours past the normal time. But I just wanted to jump on really quick as kind of a final thought and add on to what Lucas was just saying, if that's okay.
Please do, Rachel.
So I was in the P3s. I did all of that, do all my search and rescue stuff. And I have to kind of agree with Lucas on this. The fact that they had gotten that deep, that's when you're going to have a higher tendency for those kind of catastrophic things to happen, right? It would be a lot more surprising if they were only 200 feet down versus where they were. But again, going back to, you have a bunch of brilliant minds. You've got somebody who knows those systems, somebody that created and helped build that whole thing. If they were alive, sitting on the bottom, they would have done everything in their power. And with all the redundancies they did have, I just feel like they would have been able to engineer something in some way, some form of a
thing.
a
And you're right, the
better
whole
chance.
fish hook thing.
And I agree. It just seems more likely that it was probably
and even
an hour and 45 minutes.
And what's depressing
like
as
a
well,
balloon.
even if that's not the case, and Andrew, I'd love to hear from you as well, and Ryan, good to have you on stage. Even if that's not the case, though, Rachel, is that so? We have Dr. Ken Letters, who's being interviewed by the BBC, and that came out exactly 40 minutes ago, and he said that that's not the only issue. Running out of oxygen, which either run out or about to run out, according to our timer, is 3 hours left. The vessel may have lost electrical power, which is the other scenario. The optimistic scenario for Silverwater to survive is that it's lost electrical power. And that plays a pivotal role in controlling oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. I know we've talked about this a few hours ago.
up-to-date map.
As oxygen levels fall, the proportion of carbon dioxide being breathed out by those inside will rise, causing potentially fatal consequences. So the level of carbon dioxide versus oxygen is an issue. I'm going to read out what he said exactly. As levels of carbon dioxide build up, then it becomes sedative. It becomes like an anesthetic gas, and you will go to sleep. And also another thing he mentioned, another danger beyond that is hypothermia, where the body gets too cold to function. And we
Basically,
know that
where we're at
CEO
is we're in the
61 years old,
last
and a few others are older gentlemen.
push to
which means that they're
rescue
more at risk
for this to be a
and
rescue
getting too
mission
cold
and
for
not a
their body to
recovery
continue
mission.
functioning. Rachel?
And that's
I
kind of
don't
why
think
I
that they'll stop,
questioned the
obviously, just
the
because
hypoxia theory, because
they feel
let's say
that
there was a
they're
mechanical failure, there was an
they're
electrical failure,
looking for
whatever.
this
Well,
vessel.
when you lose
If it's
the
down there, they'll
ability
probably
to
find it.
circulate the
If
oxygen
it didn't implode,
for the scrubbing, you can't pump air into the ballast anymore. Like, so they could have had some kind of failure, sank to the bottom, and then just had hypoxia and just gone to sleep, and it's just sitting down on the bottom somewhere with no way to do anything, right? Like, you go to sleep and you just don't wake up. But you can't clear the ballast.
We do just came out 2 minutes ago. So deep sea explorer David Gallo, Dr. David Gallo, who've been talking referencing a lot. Well, he just said 2 minutes ago in an interview to ITV's Good Morning Britain, he said that the noises coming from underwater are credible and repeatable. So it kind of goes against what you said, Lucas. It's interesting. He said they're credible and repeatable, meaning teams need to assume they're coming from the submersible and move quickly to locate.
I'd like to add something to this.
I'm just curious if there's any more reports kind of confirming that, because every other report that's come out has said it's just completely inconclusive.
Mario,
I've seen the inclusive reports, yes, but it's interesting to get that different take. Go ahead, Ron and Ken.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. I know the submarine had a monitoring system for oxygen. They had an oxygen cell and a meter that would read out the partial pressure of oxygen in the submarine, so they could monitor that. And also the CO2 absorbent system was probably a circulatory system, but in the if the electricity failed, they could break out the sophnoline pellets and spread them around the hull. and it would absorb carbon
Yeah, you
dioxide
did
just
talk
fine.
about, yeah, exactly. So that addresses that issue. It's just beautiful how much you guys know. It's incredible. So yes, Captain, that would resolve the issue of too much carbon dioxide being breathed out. It's a really good point, Captain. That's incredible. Kent?
Yeah, in fairness though, Mario, and I hold journalism to a high accountability. I don't think it's fair that the BBC is pushing this now when any decent observer can see that we don't know where it is. The likelihood of us getting there within the next 4 hours, then setting up and recovering it within another 4 hours is most unlikely.
No, so the BBC is saying something different. So yeah, so the heading as well says it ends with the following. I didn't read out the last quote that David Gallo says. He says they've only got to fully ready. They've got to go fully ready as if this was the sub, because to locate it and to get it up to the surface, it takes hours, and we don't have hours. We haven't even located it, and we have 3 hours of oxygen. So that kind of makes your point. Go ahead, Andrew.
Mario, can I just interject?
Yeah, go ahead,
right
Andrew.
Here? So here's the deal. I'm a DoD analyst, mainly in space and air, and I don't want to speak on behalf of any intelligence agency or anything like that. But here's the deal. I've tracked these things for a long time, and I'm looking at a situation where I've seen Chinese, American, Japanese subs that would not submerge to this level on a daily basis or on a tour basis, regardless of what powers their subs this far, for no good reason. And it's like, because there are so many threat levels that correlate with that, and so much comes around with that you wouldn't do this on a normal tour. You wouldn't do this on a normal run. To see this happen with an amateur, I think we could pretty much, forget 99%. This thing's gone. And I don't care what signals you're hearing, but after what I saw, if this is the same sub that I saw that was manufactured on the CBS News or whatever highlight that I saw, there's no chance that this thing's still surviving. That's terrible to say because there's people on board, obviously. But this isn't something that we can possibly see as still a thing that we can talk about. We can talk about why this went wrong, but there's no chance this is survivable.
But Andrew, you did mention 2 points. You were critical of the quality of the submersible, even though it's done this expedition a few times. I agree with your concerns there. In terms of the pilot being an amateur, the CEO, he's done this expedition multiple times. He's been regarded, even though he's a risk taker and probably pretty reckless when it comes to safety.
And that's all well and nice, but there are American, Chinese, and Japanese subs, and in my opinion, those are the 3 best quality subs that I've seen, diesel or nuclear powered or otherwise. And this has 4 electric batteries that are doing this at a level that DoD subs can't do.
True, but
frankly,
the DoD subs would spend months underwater. In this case, it will just go in for a few hours and back out. So it's not expected to. Go ahead.
What are we really talking about? I mean, is it
Guys,
true that this is being
absolute
done with
downer.
a PlayStation paddle? Are we playing some game where this is? We can hear honing devices. We can hear anything that this is popping off. Are we still playing around like this is a real sub that's still down there? This is a joke.
Yeah, so in terms of the remote control as well, and Ryan, I'm going to go to you next, but in terms of the remote controller, that was being, a lot of people were referring to that in a mocking way, but we did have an expert come on and say it's relatively common. It's actually some positives to using that because it just makes it very easy to function. There's no real downside, even though it might sound kind of ridiculous. And some of the biggest, the deadliest weapons in war is just a little drone with a remote control, and but you've made some valid points. Sorry, go ahead.
I think you could lose.
Andrew, I think you just dropped out. Oh, you're back. Yeah,
I think there's a massive downside to that, and it's as simple as the fact that this isn't a video game. You need to look at hydraulics. You need to look at your sensors. You need to look at everything. I mean, Lucas, maybe speak to this, but there's no. Let's be actual humans about this. This is a PlayStation panel.
So just a bit of an update, 2 updates here. Number one is that we're down to 3 hours of oxygen left based on the countdown that most people are using right now. If you go according to one of our guests earlier, one of our experts, it would be 2 hours, but I'm using the optimistic numbers. And would you have the Foreign Office said they are not directly involved in rescue efforts. This is a highly technical, highly difficult situation, not one that my department is directly involved in, but of course we stand ready to support our friends around the world. This according to the British Foreign Office, talking to the Independent. So just to kind of summarize for the audience what we've gone through now before we go to Ryan and Charles, good to have you as well. Reminds me of the FTX days. But what we have here is various scenarios that could have happened. Would you have a leak that destroyed communication, but a leak is not a leak that you'd expect from a tap. A leak is one you'd see in movies in a submarine or in a ship that had that's been hit by a missile, for example. You start seeing that like a fire hydrant. That's what the leak that you'll see, and it will destroy the small submersible. You got the other one, which is a catastrophic implosion, which is, I would say, based on everyone that's been here, is the most likely scenario. But would you have 2 specialists that would disagree and say there's another scenario? So the catastrophic implosion, it will make a noise that should have been detected. But
that's what I'm saying.
Carbon fiber is crazy brittle.
If it was a catastrophic explosion, like they want to say,
that's the reason that would have failed.
How was that not picked up?
That deep.
How was that not heard?
So one of the points that one of our panelists made. The other one's a mechanical failure, but then why weren't the ballasts released? If they were, then they would be floating up. But a reminder, if they are floating above water, that does not mean they can open the hatchet, the hull, whatever you again,
I'm getting Malaysian air.
And then just breathe oxygen. You have to open it from the outside. You cannot open it from the inside. So that means the 3 hours of oxygen, even if they're above water and the ballast is released, and we know that they would manually release after 24 hours. It'll be automatic, but it'll be a non-mechanical release within 24 hours. But there's ways they could release it earlier as well. So there's a mechanical failure. They could have triggered the ballast to be released, and there's multiple ways of doing that. We read about that earlier. So these are the 3 scenarios, and I'll put number 2, a catastrophic implosion or a mechanical failure, as the 2 most likely scenarios. If it is a mechanical failure, then we could assume that they are still alive, and we did just hear an expert that said that these noises that were heard earlier are likely to be them, and they're making the assumption that it is them. But then we've heard other reports that say this is inconclusive. So just getting a lot of mixed signals on that point here. And I'm just getting more updates here on the search and rescue efforts, but no results yet. I do want to go to Ryan. Ryan, you've been trying to jump in. I would love you to go ahead and respond.
Hey, how's it going? I'm a P3 and P8 pilot for the military. I've been doing it for 14 years. Hunting submarines for those 14 years. And I'll tell you that in particular this P3 that drops sonobuoys, the DIFAR sonobuoy, like it's a passive sonobuoy, it'd be very difficult, almost impossible to hear tapping for a small vessel such as that at 12,000 feet below the surface. So I would almost certainly rule out being able to ascertain those taps as survivors making essentially a proof of life. If anything, if this submersible would have surfaced, that is where the P8 and the P3 specifically would thrive, and you would have been able to pick up that vessel if it had made the surface due to our sensors.
So you're saying that so what you're saying is essentially, Ryan, that, and we've talked about this earlier, that it does have various equipment that would allow it to float up. They have a VH radio, they have an EPIRB, they have a sat phone, they have a Garmin InReach. So essentially they've got all these devices that if there was a mechanical failure and the ballast did release, that means all the waste would have come off. It would have had positive buoyancy and would have floated back up. And then there would have been spotted because of these various devices. Am I summarizing what you're saying right, Ryan, or I got it wrong?
Yes, certainly. We would have been able to pick up those signatures on the surface had that vessel made it to the surface. So this lends more to pointing towards a catastrophic failure, at the time that they said that they lost signal. Now, I'm not involved with the search and rescue, so I'm not.
So this is Mario Nawfal
directly plugged in with
let me
this
see.
effort, but I will say that just like
Host of
currently
Twitter's
flying
largest
the P8
spaces.
and experiencing the
And
P3
so
as well.
he's basically just a news
You
reporter.
know,
and he's
that's
got
such a
these
small
experts.
vessel with such a small signature of tapping in the ocean. You're not going to pick that up at 12,000 feet below, assuming it made it to the ocean floor. Especially with an air-launched sonar buoy.
Captain, sorry, I'll let you respond. Also, Captain, if you see on your screen, let me do it again for you, Captain. If you see on your screen, I'm gonna do it again. You'll see a co-host invite. If you can accept that, so you can become a co-host, because you've been very constructive to the discussion. That gives me space to bring up someone else as well, because we do have another special guest that will join. Captain, your co-host now. I'll let you respond quickly to Ryan. I saw you on mute.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to let you go after this little chat, as I've got stuff to do tomorrow, and I do need to get some sleep. But I was speaking earlier about a situation where we were working with DARPA down in San Diego, and there was a ship broadcasting sounds that was being picked up over 1,200 miles away, horizontally through the ocean, up at Whidbey Island at the Naval Air Station. So sound travels underwater like you can't believe. It goes for a very, very long way. I don't want to argue with the P3 pilot about the sonar buoys, because I don't have any experience with that. But I think if someone had a hammer and they're down there only 2 miles down and they're banging on the hull, I think that would be heard by not necessarily the sonar buoy that's at the surface getting tossed around, but it could be heard by the SOSA system. And I do believe that if there was a real implosion of that submarine, that the SOSUS array would have picked it up and we'd know by now. Unless, for some reason, the Navy's keeping that quiet and they don't want to let them know the capabilities of the SOSUS system. So I thank you very much for letting me come on and preach to a few people here. It's been very informative, and I truly appreciate it. So
No, I appreciate it, Captain. You've been extremely, again, just Captain, you've been with us for hours. You've met the CEO, you've been at their facilities, and you've got a lot of experience in this. So your insight has been incredible. And feel free to jump back on if there's any major developments. If miraculously in these next 3 hours of oxygen being left, we do hear any sort of noise or any sort of communication. I will go in the meantime. Again, thanks a lot, Ron. Really appreciate it. I will go to Charles. Charles, how are you?
Okay, take care, sir.
Thank you, Ron.
Stay in touch.
Thank you, Ron. Go ahead, Charles. How are you?
I hope you guys can hear me. I'm actually on a Starlink connection in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I'm right now doing a sea salvage operation, so it's kind of ironic that this happened right at the same time.
I read somewhere that you're doing sea salvage operation. I knew I read something about you and space or you and the ocean. Now I know it's you and the ocean. So,
oops, sorry.
As well as some pretty established MUV pilots, and we're looking for a meteorite that hit the Earth in 2014.
Oh my God!
And we've found some interesting fragments, and we've been at sea now for about a week. So I've gotten over the whole seasickness, and we're having a lot of fun with sluices and magnetic sleds, and just trying not to burn out our winch. It's been a lot of fun out here. Papua New Guinea is not a bad place.
And Charles, your initial thoughts on what we've heard so far, and what your, from all the information that we've heard, do you think this is a leak that destroyed communication, but obviously would have just killed everyone there as well? Catastrophic implosion, or you think they're dead? And is that dead through a mechanical failure and they just ran out of oxygen by now, or an implosion?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there's a lot of MUV people here, and some of which are incredibly experienced and actually have been in a 5-year fight with the OceanGate guys, going back and forth about the need to certify and the potential reputational damage to the industry. But what I heard was that how you get to the Titanic is that you do a corkscrew pattern, and you about a 3-degree turn, and you keep diving and diving, and it takes a few hours to get to the bottom, and then you spend 90, 120 minutes there. And then you go back up, and it's a whole day trip. So what I heard was that about an hour and a half into it, that something was detected. They dropped their weight, started coming up, and then boom, a catastrophic implosion. And that fact pattern would fit, given the redundancies that were on the sub, and also something called cycle fatigue. So if you guys Google Aloha Airlines 243, that's like the canonical aircraft example of cycle fatigue. It happened in 1988, where basically Aloha was flying between all the islands, and they'd only go for 20 minutes or 30 minutes at a time. So they got tons and tons of cycles on the airframe. But the FAA at the time was only measuring things by flight hours. And so the plane was in much worse shape than the FAA thought, and actually it exploded. So if you Google it, you can actually see an image of what a catastrophic pressure release looks like. But somehow that plane survived. And that was only a few atmospheres. Where the Titanic's at, it's about 380. And the problem with carbon fiber is it's a very brittle substance. And if you run that through multiple cycles, you'll get fatigue. And you see this in like the Airbus A380 or the early 787s that were fabricated by Boeing, because they're carbon fiber planes, that they get cycle fatigue pretty quickly. And this is just like the most hostile environment possible. So I think that the Coast Guard and Navy are fully aware that an implosion happened, and they're just going through the motions and waiting for the time to run out before they switch over to a recovery operation. But it's what I've heard from the people here and from the discussions I've had, and also from former employees who are at that place, and just also the Occam's razor scenario, given what's going on here. And it's a good way to die. Your brain can't even perceive your death. It's so quick and rapid. It's certainly a hell of a lot better than suffocating, you know. And I actually did talk to the OceanGate people about 4 months ago, because I thought it'd be really cool to go to the Titanic, and we had reached out and got pricing, and I kind of looked at it to say, okay, well, where are the certifications and these things? I mean, there are subs that can go that far down, like the Triton 13,000, for example, was built specifically for that mission profile. But this thing doesn't have the right geometry. The seals between the titanium spheres and the carbon fiber cylinder aren't right. And it's just one of those things where the more the chance of failure goes up exponentially. And it's, you know, the pilot who was driving is an extremely experienced guy. He's been in the MUV business for a very long time. But, you know, it's not a matter of skill or technical expertise, quality of the vehicle. And the vehicle was never rated to go at these depths. It's a heterogeneous structure that kind of patched a bunch of things together. So some things were designed to fail at 13,000 feet. Other things could probably handle that depth. And the carbon fiber, it's only going to last as long as your cycle fatigue lets you do that. And the problem with carbon fiber, unless you have very sophisticated equipment, you can't detect the weakened areas. And the minute you have one, that pressure just crushes you. So they were, and the other thing is, if it was an electric, given that they were still descending, it's not really clear what they would get caught up on. It's open water. So there's really nothing to get entangled. And it's very easy to drop your weights, and ultra deep subs, like the stuff they take the Marinas Trench or other things, they're designed that if you have a failure, you drop weights and you just buoyancy pushes you back up. Now, it'd be really shitty if that happened and we find them later on, because apparently they bolted the hatch shut from the outside. There's like 17 bolts that have to be removed, and they can't actually open the hatch themselves. Very much similar to the original Apollo capsule before all the astronauts burnt to death, and they changed that design feature. So it's just a monument to a very litigious company that threatened to sue anybody who said that they needed to get certified, and a lot of homebrew stuff.
Lori,
and then just a lot of lies where they said NASA helped them design it. It's materially untrue. And so the University of Washington helped them with the tests. And yeah, there were some tests and it failed at that depth. And they got so lucky the rounds they ran it, but they weren't throwing the hull away every time. And so you have cycle fatigue, and it imploded. So, you know, in a few hours, they're going to wrap it up. And then we probably won't discover the pieces of it end up on the Titanic itself. If they were directly over it, it kind of fell there. Otherwise, it's just yet another one of the thousands of shipwrecks and, you know, ship-like things that have wrecked in the Atlantic Ocean, in that area.
Charles, I'm going to ask you another question. What is a different scenario? Because your scenario is one that's being referenced by most panelists right now, especially over the last couple of hours. But, you know, I'll try to paint one for you and let me know if this is plausible and how that would look like. If we did see a mechanical failure, they could have, there's been reports of them having that issue before, and they continued operation. The operating procedure allows them to continue for another hour and a half, I think, or 2 hours after a communications failure. So if they did have a mechanical or communications failure, they would have continued operating, gone towards the Titanic, because the guy's been doing it for so long. He is a risk taker, and that's where they would have the failure could have gotten worse, and eventually they could have gotten stuck within the Titanic. They could still be there right now. And then because they are stuck, the dropping the ballasts wouldn't help them.
Yeah, well, that it would be just inconceivable to me, given the experience of the pilot. If you have a mechanical failure with an MUV, you don't continue to dive. You try to get up as quickly as humanly possible, because things don't tend to just fail in isolation. That problem can cascade, and you can quickly go from a minor problem to a major problem to fatal in a very short period of time. So I don't think that that's a likely scenario. It just wouldn't make any sense given the people involved, because the CEO is quite reckless.
So this
But there's
guy,
also
obviously,
another
he's not
person, a Frenchman,
sugarcoating
who's in his
anything.
70s,
He
who's
has
been
no
in the
reason
industry
to.
forever and knows everybody.
He's not.
He wouldn't do
not
that.
happy about this
Fair point.
company.
So
And
you think the possible? What would you put the percentage possibility that it
he
was an
fears the
implosion
worst.
versus the scenario of a mechanical failure, Charles? If I ask you to put a number to it.
I think it's 100%. If my sources are to be believed, and I mean, some of these people are the most reliable people in the industry, and who've been doing this for a long time, that the implosion happened while they were descending, and it shortly during that corkscrew. So they're looking for an imploded hull, and it's pretty gruesome. If you look at in Norway a few decades ago, they had a diving bell accident called the Byford Dolphin. And that's kind of what happens to you and that was only 1,500 feet, the explosive decompression. I mean, the Navy has experience recovering vessels this far down, and they typically do it, for intelligence reasons. So there was something called Project Azorian, which was back in 1974, Soviet nuclear sub that was at 16,000 feet. But that took an enormous amount of planning and time, and $800 million. It's not cheap to recover these types of things, and generally speaking, they only do it when there's something to gain.
And then we just got news a few minutes ago, or about 15 minutes ago now, from Jersey, an ROV from Magellan. Is currently being loaded into a C-17 plane at Jersey. The sub is called Juliet, and is heading to the Titanic wreck. But it's not really good news, because it will take 48 hours to get there. So the chances of that having any impact on the survival of the passengers is zero. Before going to Joe and Kent, I see you had a hand up as well. I do want to give a quick update that I had, but there it is. Okay, so so the point that you've made, Charles, and the point I've made as well, like the alternative to an implosion is them having sunk and now surviving on the last 3 hours worth of oxygen that they have, which is gruesome, because Everett Chase just sent that question, and the question alone will tell you how gruesome what they would be going through, assuming it wasn't an implosion, which I'm starting to hope more and more as time passes that it is an implosion, to be honest. And I'll read out his question, something we've talked about earlier, very briefly, like we've barely touched on it because it's too gruesome to imagine. No one has brought up that life support is about to run out for five passengers. But if there is ever a scenario where the choices are made to elongate a rescue timeline for the other passengers, example, there's a 19-year-old, we know there's a father and a son, who has the most years left. So other passengers start sacrificing themselves to elongate his survival window, which is, again, very gruesome to even imagine. And that's why I'm like, to be honest, Charles, like I want it to be an implosion, because there's no chances of surviving if it is a mechanical failure, if they're somehow stuck. Or they kind of just quickly ask you a question. Another last question I have for you is that, what about the fact that they did have a mechanical failure, the ballasts were released, but then either they didn't have the devices, the VHS radio or the sat phone or the Garmin InReach or the EPIRB, they didn't have those devices, or they didn't work within the sub, and they'd be stuck above surface right now, no one could find them. Is that a possibility?
I mean, it's a much more unlikely possibility, but it's the second most likely possibility after implosion, because this was likely a problem that was detected while descending, not ascending. And so that means if there was an issue, the first thing you do is just go back up and
what would
reassess.
Charles, why do you think this is an unlikely possibility?
Because given the amount of assets that are inside the area, it's very unlikely they wouldn't have been able to spot something like that. It's a pretty well understood area. The search pattern is large. It's twice the size of Connecticut, but this is something that you'd be able to see.
Yeah, but can you see it? Is you're talking about a tiny submersible that one person barely fits in it?
You would be amazed at the technologies that the U.S. government's developed for drug smuggling, and the Coast Guard has available, because the drug smugglers use submarines and all kinds of things to bring narcotics into the United States. So there's a very, very sophisticated listening system and aerial asset system to find things. And for a high-profile case, they'd engage that. But the thing is that the fact pattern just doesn't move in that particular direction.
Let me
the
read
fact
out.
pattern moves in the direction.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to read out, just came out before going to Joe, introducing Joe Vargas. A former OceanGate subcontractor just said that the cutting edge technology that OceanGate uses was considered controversial. The former subcontractor who worked on the development of the submersible, and I don't know if this is the one that had the legal issue with him. I don't think it is. So this is new. So the design choices were considered, quote, controversial at the time it was being made in 2018. So this is a new person called Doug Vernig, who has a background in engineering and operations, worked on the project for about a year in an operations role. He expressed admiration for Stockton Rush, who's the CEO, who he interacted with while at work. But he would say he would stop and talk and ask what we were doing, and he would move stuff around. He loved to think. Everyone talks positively about the person, but everyone is critical of the quality of the submersible. So that just came out from CNN. I do want to go to Joe. Joe, you were stationed at the Point Loma sub base for 5 years in San Diego. You were the only ship on base that carried the Admiral. The Navy sub is bigger, but so I'm just reading out the comment you sent us. The Navy sub is bigger.
I
but it's really
think
small and
so. The
claustrophobic
question
inside.
is,
I
if there
can't
was an
imagine being stuck in
implosion,
that smaller submarine.
wouldn't it?
I want to get your thoughts on what you've
Wouldn't
heard so
it have
far.
disturbed the water surface?
Obviously, maybe
So that's what I thought I heard.
your thoughts
when
on
they
the experience
said
they would have gone through
when
if they were still
implosion,
alive.
that
But we're
they would be able to
starting to
pick
look more
that
and
up.
more that there was an implosion.
Now, maybe
and
they did
thankfully
pick
they
it up.
didn't go
Here's
through
the
that
thing:
harrowing experience of being
we don't know if
suffocating to
they
potentially
did or they
death
didn't.
over the last few days. What are your thoughts, Joe?
And they're probably not going to tell. Maybe they
Good to see you, Mario. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I can see you as well.
That it was
I just
an
wrote to
implosion.
your guy inside DMs and let him know like what Charles just said.
You know, this whole going through the motion things. And Pancakes, thank you so much. I appreciate your $10 donation.
I don't have technical analysis behind submarines. We were. I was on the APF 11 Coronado
with this, to be honest with
ship
you.
that was in Port Loma from '98 to 2003.
Really,
and
people
the
tell me
idea
that
of being on the Navy sub.
People tell me I don't scream enough. Then when I pick it up a little bit, you know, they say, "Wow, you don't."
Friends would not bring me on. Never went underwater.
You know?
I mean, the way that they live there, it was kind of mind blowing to think about doing that job. It takes a special type of person to do it. Like racks, you know, that there's a limited amount of people that are in there. One guy is on watch. When he gets off watch, they have to share racks because they're limited on space. Obviously, I just saw a couple pictures that was posted on the thread here. Is that submarine, the small one, exactly the one that they're on? Because that doesn't seem like it holds more than one person.
Exactly, the one that's pinned above is the one. That's why that we've talked about it earlier. That they would barely fit in. They have to sit, you know, only one person can stretch at a time. So if there was no implosion, and they did survive, and they obviously, you know, potentially suffocating to death over the next hour, 2.5 hours, it would be a not a comfortable experience either. Charles, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, just one last thing, and I don't know how long the satellite's going to hold out, but I got to get going to the next salvage. But
hold on, so Charles, 2 seconds. When you say next salvage, are you actually going underwater right now in what? Are you going? I hope you're not going into submersibles.
No, we're not using MUVs on this one. It's just sleds, and we have a winch with 2,000 meters of line. So if they somehow survived and it was a mechanical failure and somehow the ballast system's not working and it doesn't create that positive buoyancy and get you back up to the surface, they wouldn't die, guys, of oxygen depletion. It's so cold down there, and without any electricity, you're talking about freezing to death, just like Jack did in Titanic, you know, with the whole door scene.
No.
You can't survive in, you know, sub-zero weather in a cold tube, you know, for that long with stagnant air. You're going to freeze to death just like you would, you know, during a snowstorm or something like that. So, the people are playing out all these scenarios like, oh, well, maybe they kill some people to get some more oxygen, or they do this, that, or the other. It's not really a good mental process to go down. The most likely scenario is implosion. If for whatever reason they couldn't, they got stuck or something, although that would be nuts, they're just going to freeze to death inside the sub
best.
before
So essentially, what the two most plausible scenarios is an implosion is number one. The number two is they dropped the ballast because they had a mechanical failure. They dropped the ballasts and they floated up, and now we're search and rescue trying to find them above water. But obviously, an implosion is looking significantly more likely, considering that if they did float up, they would use one of the 4 devices that I've mentioned to communicate or to send out some sort of signal, or they would have been found either way with the technology that we have.
Yeah, and also we have evidence from them showing the carbon fiber system they chose fails at 4,000 meters, and they use that in their marketing videos. Normally you want 1.5 to 2 times the depth to validate the material before you have failure, to give room for the inconsistencies in the build and also the cycling. I just don't see how they survive.
Charles, what's crazy to me is that there's a billionaire on board. And the reason I say that, the billionaire doesn't mind spending as much money as needed to make sure that they're safe. And then, so there's a British billionaire, and there's also a prominent Pakistani family with a son that's with his father. So just that father and that billionaire, wouldn't they, why would they get into a sub that has that many concerning reports? Why wouldn't they do their basic due diligence?
I couldn't tell you.
I was just going to say, folks, 2.8 million people a year are killed in occupational events. They don't ever think they're going to die when they go to work. The risk profile, they don't comprehend. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. And could I quickly ask you, are you on Avi Loeb's expedition?
Yes, I am. I actually financed it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, thank you, sir. So much respect to you and the gentleman doing that. I wish you the very best. Sorry to jump in, Mario.
Small world you guys live in. Charles, I didn't know. Yeah, what brought you to this industry, Charles? That's a bit of a surprise, from an FTX space to now talking about a missing submarine while in the ocean yourself, looking for, what was it? What were you looking for?
We're looking for a meteor that may have interstellar origins, and we're having some fun with it. But yeah, I grew up in Hawaii, and I always grew up around the sea, and I've been interested in these for years. And I always surround myself by some really good subject matter experts and domain experts. And this particular expedition has some exceedingly experienced people on it. But that's what you need. You build a team, and then you rely heavily on that team to help you kind of construct a plan on what to do. And going to the Titanic is an exceedingly dangerous thing. So you need a good team and good
so Charles,
and there was none of that.
Charles, let me read out just one thing that we read it earlier. Dr. David Gallo, who's a deep sea explorer, you may know him as well. And he said one positive thing, one negative thing. The negative thing is that he stressed that it will take hours to rescue the sub once it's been found, if indeed it turns out that the repetitive banging noises detected are coming from the lost sub. So you're speaking to Good Morning Britain. I'm going to read out exactly what he said. In this case, the noises are repetitive, every half hour, I believe. 3 different aircraft heard them in their sensors at the same time, and it went on for 2 days plus. So essentially for 2 days plus, we have banging every 30 minutes. It's still going on, apparently. There's not a lot in the natural world we can think of that would do that on a 30-minute cycle.
Right. Well, you're assuming that human beings are doing that. It's entirely possible that he put an automated knocking device as a distress beacon. So if it imploded, that could have survived the implosion, and it's just knocking.
So there's automatic devices that would make a knocking sound at a certain rate?
Yeah. Yeah, because what happens if the crew gets incapacitated? You still want people to know there's people there and the craft is intact.
And would that device survive an implosion?
I have no idea. Yeah, because there's not even a black box in the submarine. The thing is, when you have a certified sub, there's a checklist of shit you go through, and there's all kinds of independent agencies that look at stuff, and they require you to have a lot of redundancies and very sophisticated equipment. If you homebrew it, who the hell knows? It's like building your own airplane or your own helicopter and just flying it. It's you might have something, you may not.
Leroy, you've been listening to the assessment. I know you've been with us for a few hours. Would you agree with Charles's assessment?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to, I do, and one of the things I want to say about Charles and Lucas is that they helped me a lot with explaining that the design of the hull was not done by NASA and Boeing. Those were the early reports I read. That was what gave me confidence that it was probably a good hull. And, you know, you don't normally laminate Kevlar and metal together because they have a delamination issue, especially under pressures like that. But, you know, I kind of pacified myself when it said that they embedded strain gauges into the glass reinforced plastic. And that's how they were monitoring anomaly, or they were not monitoring the hull for fatigue. But, you know, and now all
You know what it
becomes suspect.
sounded like to me
If none of that
more
is
and
true,
more
all
is
that's been debunked.
that these
And
people that
just
are
writing
in the know, that
software
know
to
about
monitor the hull
submarines and
through strain gauges
that
would be
they're
an enormously complex
completely
thing to do. It
disgusted
would take
by
a NASA Boeing kind of level,
this
but it doesn't sound like there was
OceanGate
much rigor in the hull
tin
as I had
can
thought. And
piece of
the
crap
one thing Charles said about factors of safety,
because
I
and
assume
they all believe
factors
that
of safety were
because
probably 200%. If they weren't even
if you
1.5%, if
keep
they were
putting it
operating
under all
at their
that
crush
pressure,
depth or
it's
near their crush
going
depth, well,
to
no wonder they could make 10
eventually
successful
break.
dives and then
And that's
collapse
what
on
people
the
are
11th
leaning
or
But then,
12th.
Leroy,
right
just
now.
for the audience, we are at 2.5 hours
It
of
sounds
oxygen
like
left,
that is
which
the
it
consensus
makes
is
it
that
again makes the
you
other
know, these
option
people are
that
like,
they
look,
are
this thing
alive
was an
to
accident
see
waiting to
more people.
happen. You guys
Just
are
a question
looking
for you,
for a
Leroy,
miracle,
that if it was a
but we don't
mechanical
see a
failure and the
miracle
ballasts were
possible
released,
here because it
Charles did say
sounds
this is
as
the
though
second most likely
this is
scenario.
a
So my question to you
catastrophic
there would be,
event.
how
And I
likely do you
don't know
think that
why they
is?
wouldn't tell. I don't know
And if you
why
can
the Coast
elaborate
Guard
on the
wouldn't
answer as
say,
well.
"Hey,
Because
this
it
is
does make
why,"
sense.
or
There's a
"This is
mechanical
not
failure. He
why,"
releases a ballast.
or what
They
we
come out.
heard.
Just the only question is then why wouldn't they
But
have these devices or
they don't have
send
to
out
they
some
don't
sort of
share
signal?
all this
Well,
information.
you know, when they do different failure
But what it
analysis and
sounds
they
like
do
is
different
that
protocols,
this,
it seems to me that one of the
as it
most common
deeper
one
and
that they
deeper
would
and
have just
closer
beat to death
to the
was,
ship,
if we
the
happen to
more
surface,
pressure
how are
that
we going to
was
be
under that
located? It
carbon
seems like that
fiber
would
hull,
be
which
on the
the
very
more
short list of
about
things
it,
that they would have perfected.
if it hasn't been
And so it
refurbished,
seems
it
like
wasn't
it's
like it was
probably not
rewrapping it. It
that
was using
scenario
the
to me.
same damn thing
Just
every
because they haven't been
time.
located yet through
And
the various devices that they
eventually,
could use to be
what'll
located,
happen,
correct?
and I
Yes,
just,
that's
like I
one.
said, I
Yeah,
know this.
that's right. But
I've had
let's kind of
many
play this out a little bit
items
more.
that
You
were
know,
carbon fiber, and
maintenance is
it's a
also an issue.
wonderful,
So
wonderful
if
material until it's
the
not, and
CEO
then
was,
it's just all
I don't like
bad.
that word cowboy. I don't
And
see
when
how
they
somebody could
go,
do this as
they
a
go.
cowboy.
It's
It would take a lot
pretty
of
crazy.
intelligence to do what they're doing. But then it's just a matter of measuring risk. If he was a risk taker, then I could see that he could be operating more on the level of a very small safety margin. And you know, major catastrophes usually don't happen because of one failure. They happen because of a sequence of small failures that add up to be the major catastrophe. And that's a maintenance kind of issue. If he is not a maintenance kind of person, or they did not have a maintenance protocol to not, I know the hull isn't certified, but if they didn't certify it to their own satisfaction between dives, there could be an accumulation of problems just from having used the submarine and not having maintained it.
Look, Mario,
that's why.
Could I just add,
go ahead.
One of the biggest issues in the aviation industry with stress fatigue measurement and monitoring is the confinement of being able to get in to analyze all the materials in the composites. So if this is made with a combination of carbon fiber and titanium interlayered,
when I
as one
mute
gentleman
it, you
pointed
still
out
can't
earlier
hear
on,
me?
they may not have, even if they're using ultrasonics, which they wouldn't be using on a daily basis, they wouldn't be able to necessarily monitor a weak point arising in the vessel. Even if they were monitoring it to look for that, if it wasn't obvious, it could be in the interlayers, and they could get a deficiency in the vessel integrity without even knowing it, unless they take it back and do a full X-ray. Just to make a point, that's all.
And Joe, just before you go, David Gallo says, quote, "It's going to be almost impossible I'm guessing finding the any survivors. We need a miracle, but miracles do happen. This according to David Gallo, who's an oceanographer and a water research expert. Joe?
Yeah, I had a question for the people out on the panel. Maybe you answered this prior to me showing up, but how many times have people been successful going down to the Titanic in the past, or was this the first time it's been done?
So I've
if
looked
I
into this.
mute
We've
them,
talked
can
about it
you hear
earlier.
me?
I think there's been about 20 expeditions in total. That I'm going to try and go back to them, but there were multiple companies. So as of 2023, there's been 20 submersibles that have visited the Titanic wreck. The first one was back all the way in 1985, and that was the first confirmed discovery of the wreck. And then the same person did 30 dives afterwards. Other subs that have visited the Titanic include, and they list the whole names of them. These subs have been used by researchers, scientists, and tourists. And then it continues talking about where the Titanic's located. But I do know as well that all of them stopped going down to the Titanic.
I did mute them. I just talked for like 2 straight minutes. I had them muted the whole time.
And I do know that Ocean, the company now, I've been doing this space for 8 hours, but the company that we're referring to is the only company that continues doing these dives. So there's no one else doing it. I don't know if there's a safety risk or it's just not making financial sense. OceanGate, sorry. There's a new update here from CNN quickly. Yeah, they're just talking about oxygen's running out as the search for the Titanic submersible approaches a critical stage. They do have 96 hours of life support, which includes oxygen here, of life support, 96 hours. And that 96 hours, based on our calculations, already expired. But based on other sources, they do say there's 2.5 hours or technically 2 hours and 20 minutes left before the oxygen runs
can you
out.
hear that? Can you hear
And
it
then
now?
even the best case scenario, they're not found. Joe?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with that. Has there ever been a failed mission to the Titanic, or is this the first one?
So not failed to this level. I know, again,
fader's all
I've
the way
learned all
down.
this just for over the last 7-8 hours and just reading up on it. But there's been, even this OceanGate had some failures, but nothing too major. They've lost communications at one stage, and they continued the mission after. Despite that, communication returned after like an hour and a half. We've had the host of the Discovery Channel wanted to go with them down on an expedition, as well as a host of another channel. I can't remember what it was. One of them decided not to go down the expedition. Just he wasn't comfortable with the safety measures. The other one had issues the first time around. They failed as soon as they got into the water, like within a few meters. And then the second time around, they got lost along the way. I think that's when they lost communication. Now, in terms of other issues, there's another one that got stuck within the wreckage of the Titanic, in the propeller of the Titanic, but they managed to get out of it and survive. So there's been no deaths as far as I know of anyone visiting the Titanic, and this would be the first one based on my knowledge. Kent, I'm not sure if you've got more context on this.
All right, whatever. Sorry, I honestly, on my end, I was muting them. First, I don't know why you could hear them. That sucks. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to bed. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope everything turns out good. Yeah. Anyway. I'm out of here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh my. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Yeah, you know what? Hold on one second. Here, I'm putting the link in there if you guys want to go listen to. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Sorry. Cool. There's the. I'm gonna pin it to the top. There you go. Check it out on Twitter Spaces. Just don't forget to mute them. Like I did. Because that's what I forgot to do. Later.